Hello, and welcome to this episode of Bipolar Black Girl Podcast. My name is Mare Fortin, and I'm your host. Today we have on Natalie, who also goes by Learn With Me Psychology on Instagram. She has a brand new podcast called Learn With Me Psychology Podcast, or is it The Podcast?
The podcast, I think, is what I did.
Awesome. Okay, so Learn With Me Psychology, the podcast, which is available now on YouTube and other streaming platform or other platforms where you listen to your favorite podcasts. So Natalie is from Canada. She is our first international guest. She is a master's student earning a degree in psychology, and she is also, like me, bipolar and has ADHD. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
Hey, I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's just always such a pleasure to meet other people who have similarities to you. And yeah, so I'm just really glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you on. I found your Instagram page and you had some videos up, and I was like, I need to talk to her. I need to see, to get her perspective on things. And she's a Canadian, and if I know geography, that's to the north. So, and it's not the United States. So, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So let's talk about your life. If you want to tell us how much you want to share, or about your journey um, receiving your bipolar diagnosis, and what led you to even seek out the diagnosis and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, I did a little video on this a while ago, so I'm gonna try to say what I said, but also add more. So what happened was for as long as I can remember, I had bouts of depression, and I just thought that that's how everybody felt. I was like, oh, everybody feels terrible most of the time.
Right,
And
right,
yeah, and even I go back to as a kid, there were times where I was on vacation and I remember thinking to myself why am I not enjoying this? I should be enjoying this. This is fun. I'm on vacation, and I remember
right,
having to tell myself I'm on vacation. This is fun. I should be having fun. And that should word is so challenging, but at the same time, it's you were on vacation and you were, at the beach, and it was just really challenging to kind of feel that enjoyment. And so I can track kind of those depression parts of my life back quite far. And so that was my normal. And it wasn't something that I thought could change. I didn't think that it was something that I should get help for or anything like that. I just thought that was normal, right? Because I had kind of, as far as I can remember, had lived like that, with my little spikes, right? But those were the rare kind of, oh, this is so much fun, spikes. And then I would come back down to my normal, which was not really baseline, but lower than baseline. And so that's how I felt kind of all the time. That was oh, in French, it's quotidien, my everyday. And so that's how I was feeling. And then a friend came to visit me, and she was telling me about her ADHD diagnosis. And she was like, oh, yeah, these are all the things that they were talking about. This is the questionnaire I filled out. And I was like, oh my gosh.
right, right. When it
What?
hits you, it really hits you, right?
Yeah. I was like, that's a thing. These things are a thing. I was like, I do all those things, all those things.
Right.
And so that got me going okay, maybe I need to go see someone. And so I waited. I waited forever one day to see a doctor, because it's so hard to get a family doctor here. So I went to a medical clinic, and I waited for, I think, 6 hours or something. If I said it
Wow.
a different number of hours in my other video, it's because I don't remember how many hours, but it was like a day. It was a full day.
Right.
And so I waited, and then I went in and I said, I think I have ADHD. Here's my self like screener. I printed it off from the internet, and I want a referral to a psychiatrist. So I said, like, I was really clear that I didn't want to do anything just there. I wanted a referral to like a specialist.
Mhm.
Um, so I got the referral. I waited 4 months, and then, well, and in the appointment, in
Oh
the
my God,
appointment,
wait, let's not talk about Canadian healthcare because right now it's sounding like it's not that great.
well, I mean, I don't have
I
anything
mean,
to
I
compare
guess it's
it
like
to. Like,
way, free or, hundreds of dollars for immediacy and then meds cost.
yeah, and I do pay for meds here. So you have to either you'll have benefits to pay for medication or you'll pay out of pocket. So that's not free in Canada,
Okay.
unless you're on like maybe a special plan or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But the appointments themselves, if they're through your province, yeah, then yeah, it took a while. But
Mm.
but that's actually not that long. Like, I thought it would take longer, to be honest.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess
Yeah.
if you've lived with it for a lifetime, you can live with it for another 4 months.
Yeah, I was like, exactly. Like, I wasn't in well, I would say like that was the most challenging part of my life. Like, everything was coming to a head, but I wouldn't say that I was in crisis. No.
Right.
I just was like really struggling with like working while also maybe trying to have friends, and maybe also trying to, go to school and like all this stuff. I was like, how am I supposed to manage all of this? And it was, yeah, it was a lot at that point in time. And so I got to the appointment, and they did like the full like kind of evaluation, and they were like, okay, so like based on like what you've shared today, like we think that you do have ADHD, but we can't give you medication for that right away because you also have bipolar. And we don't want to give you medication for ADHD and have you go into a manic episode. And I was like,
Right.
oh, first of all, what's bipolar? Second of all, what's a manic episode?
Right, right.
Like, I had no idea. So I kind of she explained it in the appointment as like, and this is kind of the explanation that I've stuck with. I have bipolar too, so this is quite true for me, but essentially like the way she described it was like you get your kind of waves of depression, but then you get your kind of higher, more elevated mood. And that's why she didn't diagnose me with depression, was because I get those higher, more elevated moods. And that's kind of how I've explained it to family and friends, was like it's
Mhm.
really similar for me in my personal experience to depression. But then because I get those more elevated moods, it's not unipolar depression, it's bipolar depression, and then bipolar hypomania.
Right.
So that's kind of that's kind of my journey to diagnosis. That's kind of how I ended up there. Yeah.
That's I mean, to go in for an ADHD diagnosis and come out with a bipolar disorder diagnosis must have been very challenging. I mean, I didn't find out I was bipolar until I landed in the hospital. But I knew already that I w- had ADHD. But I didn't really take it seriously. Know. I didn't really I didn't really know what ADHD or bipolar disorder was until I started doing this podcast, and I've been living with it forever. So I guess it for me, because I'm bipolar one depression, it it's very similar to your story, except that I was like manic during the day at school. And, when I went to bed, I would fall into like a deep depression and just cry every night. But like you, I was like, is this normal? Does everybody do this? Is this something I want to talk about? Because if everybody doesn't do it, like, I'm embarrassed, or what do I say, or what does that mean? Or do you know what I mean? All of these like things that go on in your head. So you sort of just learn to live with it until you reach the point where it's either, you know, you discover it like you did on your own, or you discover it in a, a mental ward or by a psychiatrist in some way, you know. So either way, it's distressing, I'm sure.
It just cut out for a second. So I heard you say, or you discover it in, and then I missed the next part.
Oh, I just you discover it on your own, and then you know, you just or you find out, through like an emergency room visit or a stay on
Mhm.
the ward, or through some psychiatrist at some point when. Well, I said it's distressing, but it's a distressing moment that gets you there. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So like your distressing moments, you figured out on your own with your own self test for ADHD, and then
Yeah.
they discovered that you were also bipolar.
Yeah, and I had participated in like some research a few years prior that kind of like made me think like, oh, maybe something's up, because they asked me all these questions and I was like, I don't know if this is how everybody answers the questions. And
Right,
so yeah, I think like I kind of had an idea, um but it didn't feel urgent, right? Like it felt like just been living like this. I'm just gonna keep. And then once I went on medication and started getting like kind of therapy that was more kind of targeted, I just noticed like things got so much better so fast. And I was like, wow, like I don't have to be sad all the time. I don't have to not enjoy fun things. Like, and it's been a big process of relearning how to do those things as an adult, like relearning how to enjoy things again and how to kind of make the most out of things. And I hate the idea of making the most out of like that. We use that so much, but it's true, right? Like how do we enjoy those small things like your morning coffee and that kind of thing instead of just feeling like it's something that you do every day and then have to do again the next day, right? Like so
right.
it's been a big learning process for me on this end. Yeah.
For me too, and I've also learned that, like, and I think we may have discussed this a little bit before, setting routines and sticking to those routines. So, what does your day look like if if you do, one activity later or earlier or not at all?
Yeah, so I recently discovered that eating breakfast super important for me. So I Eating breakfast, eating lunch, eating dinner are really big for me. So everybody has their own routines with food. But for me, if I can make sure that I'm eating those meals and not, forgetting to eat those meals or putting them off because I don't feel like cooking or that kind of thing, if I can make sure that I eat those meals, I keep myself pretty regulated. I notice that my emotional state is a lot more kind of in flux when I skip a meal. And so that's a really big thing for me. If I'm like already a little bit high or a little bit low and then I don't eat, I notice that it kind of exacerbates everything. The other thing is with sleep. Like if I don't sleep and get to bed, sleeping for me is an interesting one because I know a lot of people have a hard time falling asleep. I don't. Once I'm laying down, I'm out. But which I know is a blessing that a lot of people want, but it's so hard sometimes to just get into bed. And so that's where I have my issues with sleep is like, oh, I just want to do this. I just want to do this. I just want to do this. And then all of a sudden it's too late and you're not getting enough sleep. And so that really impacts me quite a bit too. So my big routines are like the simple things like get enough sleep. And I like 8 hours or more. Like that's and then make sure, and everybody's different. Like this is just what works for me. So I like to make sure that I get my sleep. I like to make sure that I have my breakfast in the morning. I drink coffee, so I have a coffee with my breakfast. And then yeah, and then I'm kind of good until I need to make sure that I eat lunch. Like that's a big one for me. If I like go out and I'm doing things, I need to make sure that I eat lunch because
I
I'll
forget to eat
I'll
all
skip.
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
So
eat until the end of the day, really. Like, I may snack
really,
a little bit, but I don't I'm not really hungry But then when I get hungry, because I've forgotten to eat, it's like I'm ravenously hungry. And then I start getting stressed out and feeling terrible. And do you know what I mean? Like it's a physical feeling, like I feel nauseous. And it's just, and then I'm like, girl, eat something. You're hungry.
This is what hungry feels like. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's different for everybody. And the same with
totally.
sleep. I can fall asleep easily. I just can't stay asleep. I only sleep 6 hours a night. But I do
Mhm.
take a nap in the middle of the day sometimes because
Mhm.
I otherwise my brain is just on overload. Like sometimes I have
When
to tell myself go to sleep if my brain is like overactive. Like I literally have to go to sleep just to stop thinking.
I mean, that's the only time I'm not thinking, if I'm completely honest as well.
Right? There's like a trillion things going through my mind right now that have
Oh, yeah,
nothing to do
totally.
with
That's
this.
life with ADHD for
Yeah.
sure. It's like, "Oh, I'm thinking about this, but also, do I need toilet paper from the store?"
Totally. So, I how did you decide? Was it because of your own personal journey with mental health issues that you decided to get earn a master's or work towards a master's in psychology?
No, so I actually got diagnosed, a few months into my program. So
Oh,
I yeah.
convenient.
Yeah, so I was, like, just starting the program, was really interested in it, and then, I got diagnosed once I was already a few courses in, and I went through this moment of like, oh gosh, like, can I still help people? Then I was like, oh wait, no, I can help people even better because
Exactly.
I understand what it's like to like go through this process. And so that was like a whole moment. But also my kind of passion for psychology came from my experience in teaching. So I'm a teacher and I saw that like okay, so there's all these supports in schools, right? Like we have, you know, different people who come into the school to support kids. We have the teachers themselves, kids have their parents, right? We have like this whole community. And then once you become an adult, like where's the community, right? Like what I just feel like people fall off, right? Like you graduate high school, and if you had mental health challenges or, you know, well, my main issue that I was thinking about was mental health challenges. You know, go to university and maybe you have a help center, or you go, you know, into work and maybe you have access through work, but maybe you don't. And it was like, how do people who are struggling kind of work through that without help, right? Like we need help, we need people to help us, guide us, and you know, support us in doing what we want, right? And I've benefited so much from therapy in my experience. I've gone to lots of therapy, and I just wanted to be a part of that process because I feel like there are, you know, so many really great teachers out there and so many really great parents and so many really great professionals that go into schools. And it kind of felt like all of this like love and care, I was like, I want to give that to people once they graduate school and once they're kind of out in the world, like, and they, you know, maybe their mom or dad are not around, or maybe they, you know, don't have that community support. Like where can those people go to get that feeling of okay, I support you, what's our next step? And that's kind of what led me I like get a little emotional, but that's kind of what led me towards like, you know, maybe I will work with kids in the future, right? And I love kids, I love families, but I also just have this really strong kind of connection with that adult experience of okay, where do you go for mental health support where you feel connected, you feel nurtured, you feel like you can kind of move forward? So that's really what I want to be a part of.
That is so awesome because I mean, outside of, you know, my husband and my psychiatrist and psychologist, I really don't have like a support network. Like, this is my support network, talking to other people and other doctors who are familiar with bipolar or focus on bipolar disorder, because that's how I'm learning, in the process of learning about me and how my brain works and how it works in, differently than other people who are bipolar or the same. Like, what traits do we have in common that are just like, oh my God, like that's totally, a symptom or sign of. And I also want to destigmatize bipolar disorder and all mental health issues, and I think that as adults, especially if you're uncomfortable with your diagnosis, you need that support to just, deal with the stigma that's attached to your diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. And I think that community piece, like what you mentioned, like the people that I have met online through Learn With Me Psychology, like including yourself, right? Just like out there reducing stigma by like sharing their stories, by being out there, being, like it's just beautiful. And the number of people that I've had message me say, like, oh, like I felt so seen in this video or whatever it is, right? Like, it's really, I just like what you're doing is so impactful. And I think that like we're getting there,
I
like
know.
we're
I'm
getting
so
there.
excited. I mean, when you told me that you started your podcast or had the first one drop yesterday, like I was so like, oh my God, this is awesome. More people are, getting out there and encouraged to, be themselves. Like for me, it's just like I just want to be myself. But in order for that to happen, I need to understand me. And in some ways, you need to understand me. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, um, and I can tell you, but if you're familiar with the disorder already, you know kind of what to expect. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people just don't know what bipolar disorder is. I really, I'm still discovering.
Well, and I think that's the thing too, right? Like things are always changing and we're gonna keep learning more. But I think if people have like people kind of know for the most part what things like depression and anxiety are, right? Like I'd like bipolar to be one of those things where like, growing up or in university when I noticed, because I noticed those cycles before I got diagnosed. I just thought that that was depression at the time. I
Mhm.
was like, oh, that's what it is. But if I had known that that kind of cyclical like routine, I guess, if I had known that that meant maybe that it was something different, then would I have gone sooner to go see a doctor, or you know what I mean? And then started understanding myself sooner and been able to have better relationships. And I talked in my episode with Mike the other day about how my relationships after my diagnosis are so much better and so much stronger just because I feel like I'm able to actually be myself in them. Like I can talk about my like more depressive dips. I can talk about my like higher dips, and people are understanding because they've had kind of a base level. I've provided them with like a little base level of knowledge, and they get it, right? Like they know that they're on my list in my mirror and they know that I might call them if I need like a little bit of support. And it's the same as when they call me and they have something that just went down, right? Like so I think it's just so important to, to have that ability to have the words to explain what's going on, because otherwise I just didn't know, like I didn't know how to explain it. So
Right. And it
yeah.
was the same. I mean, the opposite of you, a lot of my personal relationships have suffered since, because I also present very aggressive behavior because I'm also borderline personality disorder. So
Hmm.
um when I'm manic, I'm very aggressive, but also kind of when I'm depressed, I'm sort of aggressive too. Like I'm just an aggressive person. And so I've tried to explain, but it's like, and to some, to a certain degree, it's like, especially certain people in my life, it's like they've never taken an interest in it. in and how it affects me. So I don't I just don't, I just don't talk to those people because I'm kind of like, if you're upset with me and you can't tell me why, or you don't tell me why, then I don't know what to do. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, if you if you don't give me the opportunity to say, well, I didn't mean it this way, or this is because of this, and I don't mean it personally, or whatever, I don't have a chance to explain myself. So I've lost several friends, who or several people who just don't want to hear an explanation, or maybe just don't want to accept an explanation because they've known me this way all my life, or
Mm-hmm.
that way all my life, because I didn't get help till I was in my mid 30s and didn't feel normal literally until a few months ago. So that's a long time of bullshit that's just built up in relationships over time. And now I'm here and they don't want to meet me, or they haven't stepped forward to meet me. So I just kind of forget them, which is a good thing about ADHD. You can totally forget people.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Totally out
I
of sight,
think
out of mind.
I think it's totally like I have kind of a very, I guess, small group of people who I think I'm very honest with, and who are, who are kind of, I guess, not like, who are helpful listeners, right? Who I can talk to, and who are helpful that way. But I completely agree, like, there are situations where, if it's not a helpful interaction for either of you, then
Right. You know, it'll
yeah.
either happen again in the future or it won't. In the meantime, I'm like, you know, I'm okay with it because I forget.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. I'm just
um,
trying to think. I've had a lot of relationships end, I think, because I went into like, I'll get like, sometimes my highs are more like, oh my gosh, music feels more intense, like all of those kinds of things.
mhm.
But then I do get like every so often like an irritable high. And that's when I'll get into an argument and I'm like overstimulated and I'm in an argument and I just like unleash.
Yeah.
And those moments are really challenging because it's like some of the things were things that would have bothered me anyways, but I often find myself in a situation where I'm like, oh, would I have been so annoyed about, this thing, or would I have been this much annoyed? Like I struggle with that for sure. And before my diagnosis, I think I didn't like I've had a lot of relationships end with that because I'll flip, and then the relationship is just over.
Right.
And so since my diagnosis, I've gotten a lot better at apologies. I think this is just my personal experience of like, if that person really matters to me and they're willing to listen to me, then I will go. Like, I'm thinking particularly with my family, I'll, talk to them about it when I'm like, when it's kind of petered off, and then that's
Right.
how we've managed it. But I do need time. I can't do it right away. So most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, I need time too because but I'm learning to take the time in the before I speak in the moment. Do you know what I mean? Because I have zero impulse control. Zero. If I'm thinking about it, I'm doing it. Good or bad. And I often find myself going, "Oh my god, what did I do? Just do after I just sent that email or just sent that text." I'm like, "Wait a minute, you know what I mean?" Like it's like, but in the moment, I'm just like so impulsive that I can't help myself. It's like my fingers just start going, and uh yeah, it often ends negatively.
Something I've found really helpful, it doesn't always work, but I've kind of framed for myself like reacting versus responding. I don't know if you've yeah.
I'm working on that.
Yeah, I'm working on it too. Like, am I reacting or am I responding? Because responding is more like reflective and like all those things. And then reacting is like I feel it in my body. Like I feel hot. I feel my heart racing. I feel like
Mhm.
my hands almost like not shaking, but I'm like so in it if I'm texting. Like I'm
Yeah,
like, ooh. And that for me is like what I've conceptualized as like reacting. I'm like, if I'm doing something right now in response to, it's probably a reaction and not a response, right? And so
right.
I'm working on that. So it's a lifelong process. I think.
Oh,
I
it
think you
totally
just
is.
get better and better.
Yeah. Yeah, so, how has, had, you know, do you have any of the, like, fears of crowds, fears of being, does any of that part of, like, play into your bipolar disorder? Like, for me, it's easy to stay inside because I don't have anywhere to really go. I work from home. And sometimes I feel like I'm so unmotivated to just get out and do something, which I feel is part of my, it might be part of my ADHD. Um, and then I started developing agoraphobia, and like I just lost all my confidence, and I feel like unmanaged bipolar disorder, or when you're not at your base level, you sort of show those behaviors.
For me, with going outside, it is very easy to just hang out at home. Like, I love hanging out at home. But then I notice that when I hang out at home for an extended period of time, like I have to go to work and things, but I'm able to just like not leave the house in a day and it doesn't bother me. But that's kind of my limit is one day.
Mhm.
Because I've noticed that if more than one day goes by and I'm just like working from home, because I don't work out of my house every day, but if I'm just, working from home, doing my assignments, and I don't go out, like even to the grocery store has been like my outing many times. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to get dressed to go to the grocery store. I'm going to enjoy the grocery store. And it's like, that's my outing sometimes for the day. And I think I've found that that's really important for me because going to the grocery store, believe it or not, actually makes me feel kind of nice after. But I hate going. Like I hate
I hate the grocery store. I hate the grocery store. Like, until recently, I hadn't been inside of a grocery store in close to a year, and
Wow,
certainly
yeah.
not by myself. Like,
Mhm.
and I think that's depression. Like, I just didn't want to go anywhere. I just
Yeah.
wanted to stay in my house and lay on the sofa, and that's it's not ADHD. It's more depression that demotivated me, and then started making me fearful or give me anxiety when I would think about doing those things. So going to the store was like, even getting up and getting dressed was like, almost a fear there, or saying I'm not going anywhere, so where I get dressed, and just this total depressive state. And this actually went on for like a year and a half,
Mhm.
and it's overwhelming. The store
Mhm.
for me is overwhelming. Even when I'm fine, I don't like standing in line. I'm too impatient. I'm too impulsive. I'm like, if there are 9 people in line, I'm not buying whatever I went in the store for.
The grocery store is the only place where I do wait in line because it's more annoying to put everything back than it is to wait in line. But
You're
like if
such
I
a
have
good
one thing.
Canadian. Americans, we just leave the cart and walk away. Gone.
I can't imagine doing that. That's so
Oh
funny.
my God. I can't imagine going around the store and putting everything back. They pay people here to do that.
I think they do here too, but I just oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, I guess for me, the grocery store brings me like some joy because I do like being around people. But when I'm at home, I don't feel like it's like there's a threshold. And so I don't enjoy crossing the threshold, but I do enjoy the other side. So
I
like
see.
yeah, I don't enjoy leaving, because I'm always
Mhm.
forgetting a bunch of stuff. And I don't enjoy, like actually getting in my car and like those kinds of things. But I do really enjoy being out and like,
You
oh,
don't like
maybe
the
I'll go get a
process.
snack.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I find myself doing that as well. But I'm getting better about it. Like now when I leave the grocery store, especially if I've gone in and got by myself, I feel more confident after leaving. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I know that it's good for me. But I also hate going to the grocery store because the one thing I go in for is the one thing I leave without. Always. Like I'll go in for milk, I'll get eggs, bacon, bread, whatever, shaving cream, cat food, no milk. you know.
Oh, I've done that so many times. And then everybody's like, write a list. And I'm like, you think I'm going to remember to write a list?
I do write lists and then I forget where they are.
Really?
Or I'm too lazy to check the notes part on my phone if I've written it there. So I have many lists.
I just don't write a list anymore because I feel like the grocery store I get like if I write a list, it's never in the right order. Like it's like
Okay.
zigzagging through the grocery store.
Right, right.
So I'm like more annoyed with my list, but if I just go and I free flow the grocery store, it's so
But
much more
like
fun.
as you walk up an aisle, you don't have to get everything in the order that it's on your list.
I know, but I know, but I find it so much more stressful to just be like checking back and be like, oh, that was over there and I didn't get that and I did. I'm
Yeah.
sure people do it quite well and are able to manage a list, but I really don't like it.
I've seen people do. I know it's possible. My mom does it. I can't. I'm like, oh, it's all up here, and then I
Yeah,
forget half of it.
yep. But we live without those things for a couple days and we're fine.
Exactly, exactly. Or you send your husband back. So
I mean, yeah, if you have a husband. I'm just like,
that's
man,
the
I'll
only
let
reason to
myself.
have a husband, so that he can remember the shit you forget.
Okay, I'll get me one of those.
Get one immediately.
Oh my gosh.
All right, Natalie. Well, it was so much fun talking to you, and I'm happy to hear an international perspective on mental health issues and mental health awareness, and it really brings me great joy to know that you are stepping out and uh, you know, making it known that you are bipolar and it's fine and everybody is crazy in some way or another, and and keeping the conversation going and keeping the issue top of hand, because the top of head, that's the only way I feel like we can destigmatize it, is if there are enough of us out there talking about it and getting forcing people to hear us. I always feel unheard, and I feel like this is a way to at least get it out, and I hope that people are listening.
And I think it's just yeah, if we have ADHD, we're probably pretty good at sharing our stories and that kind of thing,
I
so we
do
can
talk a
be
lot.
so we can get it out there. And thank you so much for everything that you do. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here and chat with you. And yeah, I look forward to hearing new episodes, and I'll see you around.
All right, thanks, Natalie.
Thanks.